Hey there folks, Wrel here. Yesterday there was a public playtest in which we tested the new continent locking alert that will be introduced once the critical mass update goes live. I don't have any footage from that playtest since I was running it from my desk at work, but I hope you enjoyed the background footage either way. For this playtest we had a little over 650 players show up, and that is a very respectable number for a live continent, let alone a playtest on the public test server. So big thank you goes out to those who participated, and the analyst helmet will be granted to all of those participants at a later date as well. If you're interested in what the critical mass update and continent locking alerts are all about, you can check out the dev blog that I've linked in the video description. In short though, a faction who owns enough territory and has refined enough cordium will trigger what we call a Meltdown alert that, if successfully completed, will lock the continent to the triggering faction. It's the job of the other two factions to counter this lock attempt. To win the alert, you need to defend a percentage of territory or lose the alert if the two opposing factions can drop you below the intended territory threshold. Now in this playtest, we tried to simulate about the worst possible 2v1 situation that we could come up with, and that was pretty successful. A clear indicator of what we need to avoid. None of the factions had refined enough cordium to actually start the alert naturally, so we just manually started it for the faction that was in the worst shape, and that was the Terran Republic, as they had the most territory at the start of the alert and the least amount of population, and there were no population controls on the continent. So in short, it would have been very surprising to actually see TR pull out a win. As you'd imagine though, TR got crushed like a soda can, but there was a fair amount of infighting going on between the other two factions, as they tried to make sure that neither one of them gained too much ground while pushing back the TR. This is the important part worth study, because during this style of alert, the pressure of a 2v1 is only going to be alleviated if the other two factions can be convinced to fight one another as well. There's a point where each faction, despite having that unified goal of destroying the triggering faction, will have to also focus on defending their own territory or reclaiming it from the second defending faction. Because if you don't, you stop the continent from locking, sure, but you don't get the best reward that you can get, and you also don't position your faction to win the next alert very well. Now during this test, NC and VS were the ones with that uneasy relationship. VS ended up with the most territory at the end of the alert by a landslide, and they had the most population by a fair amount as well. Now what normally happens on the live servers is that the faction with the most territory is also generally the faction with the most population. TR only had that much territory because they had control of northern Indar, which gives you a good spread of defensible bases, and players were still logging into the test server to start to defend it and take it back and that sort of thing. So what you can take from that, having participated in the playtest, is the rate at which bases were lost. And within 30 minutes, being half of the alert had very clearly been lost. So the next step will be to run another playtest with population controls enabled and to trigger the alert based on the faction with the most population. And this will simulate a much more realistic situation, as players won't be able to flood to the winning faction as easily, and the majority of territory will actually belong to a faction who has enough players to defend it. Running this test will help us identify how much resistance a faction in an ideal situation can put up, as well as point to exactly when the tipping point is for the alert that starts to convince people to do that faction infighting. And that'll allow us to potentially adjust the length of the alert, the incentive for the victor, and whether or not some tweaks can actually be made to make this alert type work. We could very well say at the end of all this that, hey, this alert doesn't feel like a good fit, and we'll just pivot to another alert type. We've designed the system in such a way that it's easy for us to do that. And it's very important for us that we provide the best experience to all players. We want alerts to feel tense, and we want players to be objective oriented, not just during the alert, but throughout the continent as well. And we want some crazy climactic encounters at the end. So if it doesn't feel like that, that's a problem that needs to be addressed before the system goes out. That said, thank you all once again for participating, and we'll definitely be announcing another playtest next week, and we'll be doing some follow-up commentary on how we feel things played out and what direction we want to move in. Also, fun fact is that Paul Giaggio, the programmer that was introduced on our most recent live stream, sacrificed his mohawk hair color for the playtest. He said he'd dye it the color of the faction who won the alert, and that was the Vanu Sovereignty, so congrats to the VS, and I hope Paul likes purple. If this video has been interesting, helpful, or entertaining, please feel free to like, subscribe, tell your friends about the channel, and go ahead, share your thoughts regarding the next update in the comments section down below. Thanks very much, folks. Wrel signing off.
defended the facility.